Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, let's do that again. I'm all for more noise in the sanctuary since we've been back, so good morning. Good morning. And welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura. I am the Reverend Dana Worsnop, minister of this congregation, which continues to give me great delight. It is good to be with you all. And I greet the good people here in the sanctuary and all those who are on YouTube or on joining us via Zoom. It is good to be together in all the ways that we can be together. And it is as a particular delight to be back together with our children and youth joining us in the sanctuary. We're going to do the Bridge of Love again, which I know that to the kids who remember it, the Bridge of Love is just how you get on out to your religious education. But it makes all of the grown-ups in the place tear up. We love it because we love you. Oh, we're so happy to see you here. And it's good just simply to be creating community, again, in all the ways that we do create community. We make this up by the sheer force of our hearts and our wills and our desires and our yearnings. And here we are. I also wish to this day, as we approach what was and still is called Columbus Day, and is now more and more often called Indigenous Peoples Day. And as we approach that day, let us acknowledge the devastation of the native peoples of the Americas since Christopher Columbus first landed in what he called the New World, even as it was an old world and it was home to people who had lived upon it for millennia. And though it still took a couple of centuries for the native peoples of the land we live upon to experience that devastation, let us still hold reverently the legacy of the Chumash peoples who lived here long before it was called Ventura County. Just a couple, actually 3 announcements. There are now over 140 items ready to be auctioned. We beat last year's record. Yep, okay, good. More than last year, and so now it's time to party. That will be on October 22nd, from 3 to 6, our country fair themed kickoff party. We'll have lots of carnival games, so fun thing to come to. And I'm going to keep going. Because, yeah. Okay, good. Somebody else out in the congregation talked at the same time I did, and I just might be crashed in my brain. No worries. I'm just sorry. Okay, so carnival games, face painting, a barbecue, there'll be with vegan options, drinks, music by our own Sunday ukulele players. The live auction has 8 really amazing items to auction off in person that night, and those include music lessons from Carolyn Bierke, a photo shoot by our administrator, Jen Luce, a David Frank chalice, which if you don't have one, now's your chance, but you might have to fight me for it. Dinners delivered to your door, a bucket of Halloween treats, etc., a sterling silver necklace set, and a Joni Mitchell tribute concert. And also, adding to that, you can bid on a sermon on the topic of your choice by yours truly. And just so you get a taste of what that could look like, today is the service that was sort of co-bid upon by Joyce Lombard and Jim Merrill. And it took almost a year, but here it is. So, if this sparks anything in your mind, you too might get a sermon on the topic of your choice. Also, please RSVP by Friday because the caterer needs a good head count. So there's information in many places about that, so go looking for that. Also, just wanted to let you know to be on the lookout for information about listening circles, which will help us process the recent challenges that the congregation has been facing. They will be beginning on October 20th and 21st on Zoom to begin, and then in person moving on into November. So be on the lookout for more information about that. And lastly, a plea for anyone who knows how to use PowerPoint. There is a task that is on our tech team that is actually fairly simple, but it's like we need 2.5 people back there, and it's it's advancing these amazing slides through the service. It's relatively simple, and if you can do that, somebody is needed next Sunday, and it's really fun back there. The tech team is having a really good time in our television studio sanctuary. So you could go back and pop your head in after the service and check that out if that can work for you. And so I invite you to arrive fully here now, wherever you are. Bring your courageous and your timid self to this place where we also invite the Spirit of truth and love to be with us as we enter sacred space.
I'm Worship Associate Seamus Merrill. We invite those who are Zooming or streaming into this service to light a chalice or candle at home as Reverend Dana lights the chalice of our free faith here in the sanctuary. I'm going to do it now. Today, we will dwell in the experiences of two great faith leaders, Jesus of Nazareth and Siddhartha Gautama. Somebody was speaking while I was speaking, and it's just sort of thrown me off. Our worship theme this month is courage, and both of these faith leaders demonstrated the internal courage of their growing convictions to withstand powerful temptations in their emerging missions. Each of them was tempted by the greatest demon of their time through seductions of earthly pleasures and worldly power. Both Jesus and the Buddha said no to the demons, affirming their courage in the faith of their convictions as they were about to begin their ministries. Both also had the courage to say yes as to the Spirit as it called to them, the courage to speak the truth as it was revealed in their hearts, the courage to offer healing to suffering and weary human hearts. May we carry their courage forward into our own hearts in our own times. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning and welcome to UUCV here in the sanctuary and online. My name's Carolyn Bierke and I'm the music director, and I would like to invite you to join me in song. Our opening hymn is O Young and Fearless Prophet. Please rise and bow to your spirit.
O young and fearless prophet of ancient Galilee, your life is still a summons to serve humanity, to make our thoughts and actions less the kind that knows not race nor station as boundaries of the mind, that learns to value beauty in heart or mind or soul, and longs to see God's children as sacred, perfect, whole. Stir up in us a protest against unneeded wealth, for some go starved and hungry who plead for work and health. Once more give us your challenge above our noisy day, and come to lead us forward along your holy way.
So I now invite the children forward for a story. Come on up here. Can I have this back? I'm going to show it, but you got to see it first. Come on up. Yay. Hey, it is lovely, lovely, lovely to see you here again. And I'm going to tell you a story today about two very important spiritual leaders from a very long time ago who who both taught people how to be free, how to be happy and not sad all the time, which sometimes being alive and when you skin your knee, you know, we've got these bodies that are a little bit fragile sometimes, and it can hurt to be alive and in these bodies. And both of these teachers were trying to tell us how to not suffer quite so much. And both of them were very probably actually real people who lived and taught, though there are all sorts of stories made up about both of them. And it's hard to know for sure what really happened. But here's what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to tell you one particular story. And I'd love for you to try to pay attention to what is similar, what's the same, and what's different in these two stories. First is the story of Siddhartha Gautama, who lived about 2,500 years ago in the country that is now India. And as the story goes, he was born as a great prince into the lap of luxury, as they say, and he didn't have a care in the world. Except that when he saw people who were suffering, who were sick, who were poor, not like he had everything he ever needed, but when he saw people who were poor, it made him so sad, and he wanted to find out why that happened, and if there was any way that he could help himself and other people be free of it. So when he was about 30, he left home and went looking for a teacher to teach him how to be free. And he listened to a lot of teachers, and none of them got it quite right for him. So one day he just got so frustrated. He was so tired of this. He goes, I want to know the truth, and I'm going to sit under this tree, and I'm not going to move. I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to move until he found out the answering to suffering. So he sat under the Bodhi tree. There was a tree, it's called the Bodhi tree, and he sat there and sat there and sat there. And this made Mara, who was a powerful demon, very worried. Because Mara liked it when people were unhappy. And he did not want Gotama to learn the truth about how to be happy. And so Mara came and he tried to throw everything he could at him. He tempted Gotama with delicious food. Here, you haven't been eating for a while. You must be hungry. Here, take this food. And then, here's a soft, cozy bed to lie on, and with lots of warm and soft blankets. And Mara just kept tempting him and tempting him. But Gotama just sat quietly under the tree. Next, Mara offered Gotama all the power in the world, saying he could make so many lives better if he was a good and powerful king. But Gotama just sat quietly under his tree. Finally, Mara mocked Gotama and just said, "So who do you think you are anyway? What makes you think you can save anyone, even yourself?" And still Gotama sat quietly under the tree. But this time, he moved his hand and simply touched the ground. And he said, "I am a child of the earth, and that is all I need." And as soon as he touched the ground, Gotama knew the truth. He was enlightened and he became a Buddha, a person who is awake, who really knows the truth about everything. And Mara knew he was defeated and faded away. Now this is from my altar at home, and this is a picture of the moment the Buddha was enlightened, because he's touching the ground. He's sitting there and he's touching the ground. So I thought I would just let you see it up close. Come on up here. It's metal, so I don't think Audrey's going to try to chew on it. And then for the next 50 years or so, Gautama Buddha taught people the truth that he had learned. Now I'm going to tell you another story. This one is about Jesus of Nazareth, who was born 500 or 600 years after Gautama. Now the story of Jesus' birth was one of the best known stories in the world. And as the story goes, Jesus was born to Mary and Joseph in a stable with animals all around and shepherds and wise men who came to see him. That's a story. Have you guys heard this story about Jesus born in the stable? Yeah. Okay, so in this Jesus, he just grew up very curious about God. And so when he was about 30, he left home to visit his cousin, John, who baptized him in the River Jordan. And then Jesus wandered by himself in the desert, fasting, not eating anything, and probably drinking only the littlest amount, for 40 days and 40 nights. And when he was most hungry, Satan, the devil, came to tempt him. Satan said to Jesus, "If you are so powerful, why don't you turn all these stones around you into bread?" And the starving Jesus said only, "People do not live by bread alone." He was looking for something more. Then the devil took Jesus to a high mountain and showed him all the countries in the world and said, "All these I give to you if you will worship me," Satan. But Jesus said only, "Get away from me, Satan. Get out of here. I don't need you or all this power. I only want to serve the Lord." And angels flew in beside Jesus. And Satan knew he was defeated, and he faded away. And for the next 3 years, Jesus taught people all over Israel and Palestine about the truth that he had learned about God. So here are two wise men who lived a long time ago, but they didn't even live, they lived 500 years apart, and they taught the same kinds of things. Now, what did you notice anything in that story that was the same about the two of them?
Two things. In both stories, the demon doesn't leave; he fades away.
Okay. The demon fades away. Doesn't just leave, but kind of fades away. Yes?
And both of them left around the age of 30.
And they were both about the age of 30 when they left to do this thing. Anything else that you saw that was the same? Noticed? Or different? Okay, Damien, what else you got?
They were both being tempted.
And they were both tempted. They were both tempted. And one of the differences that I noticed is that Jesus is, when he taught the people, he did it for people say scholars say it's either 3 or 5 years, and the Buddha lived for another 50 years and died when he was 80 years old. So some things that are the same. Oh, and also the Buddha was born a prince, and Jesus was supposedly, these are parts of the story, and we don't really know how true they are. And Jesus was supposedly born in a stable to very poor parents. So there are things that are the same and things that are different. And the thing about these two people is that we are still paying attention to what they said, because what they said was so powerful and so alive for them that we're still talking about it. So as Unitarian Universalists, we learn about them both. What's the similar, what's different, and what it means in our lives. And so that's the story for today. It is a delight to see you all. We're going to sing you on your way. You'll go right out back to the garage where there's a number of very fun things for you guys to do. If the congregation will rise, turn and face the center, and create a bridge of love, you can put your hands on the back of the person in front of you if you'd like, and we will sing you on your way.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
Each Sunday, this congregation gives away our collection into an organization in the larger community or to funds that help people in our own church. Those of you at home have 2 ways to give: through the link posted on the chat and by texting the number that's about to come up on the screen is a text to give. Here, folks here present can text to give, or you can still write a check or give cash and drop it off in the basket that is back there after the service. Our offering today goes to the umbrella organization that runs Family to Family, which serves about 50,000 meals each year to people who are hungry. There are 24 different groups of volunteers, our church is among the 24, who provide meals 5 days each week to our homeless neighbors. And the donations we give today will help keep the building that houses the kitchen and dining room open and operating. It takes about $250 each day the kitchen is open to keep the lights on and the stoves and ovens running and paper goods supplied, etc., and the rent and utilities paid. So thank you. Thank you for giving generously, as you always do, to help keep Family to Family open. We are grateful for the generosity of this congregation, which weaves a tapestry of love we call community.
Sorry. This morning, Reverend Dana and I will read the words attributed both to Gotama, who became the Buddha and is the source of Buddhism, and of Jesus, whom many Christians believe was the Messiah and is the source of Christianity.
Though they did live some 500 to 600 years apart, there are some striking similarities in their teachings that has led some scholars to look for connections between them. We will do our readings in two parts. Our first readings will be things that each man said that are very similar. Jim gets to play Gautama, Seamus Gotama, I guess, and I will speak the words of Jesus of Nazareth.
The words of Gotama. The avaricious do not go to heaven. The foolish do not extol charity. The wise one, however, rejoicing in charity, becomes thereby happy in the beyond.
The words of Jesus. If you wish to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven.
Consider others as yourself.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Let us live most happily, possessing nothing. Let us feed on joy like radiant gods.
Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven.
If anyone should give you a blow with his hand, with a stick, or with a knife, you should abandon any desires and utter no evil words.
If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other one also.
During the 6 years that the Bodhisattva practiced austerities, the demon followed behind him step by step, seeking an opportunity to harm him. But he found no opportunity whatsoever and went away discouraged and discontent.
When the devil had finished every test, he departed from Jesus until a later opportune time.
The faults of others are easier to see than one's own.
Why do you see the splinter in someone else's eye and never notice the log in your own?
Now is the time in our service when we hold up the great joys and sorrows that grace our lives. We place stones in water for both the celebrations and sorrows in our hearts, making ripples that are felt throughout our community. You can submit a joy or sorrow for sharing via a link on the website, uuventura.org, or a link in our Thursday email bulletin, UUCV This Week. Those received by 10 o'clock on Saturday night will be shared that Sunday. I invite you now to speak into the gathered community or write into the Zoom chat the names of those you wish to celebrate or memorialize, or those in need of the loving embrace of this beloved community. Please feel free to continue to add to the chat, even after the silent pause has ended. Reverend Dana will now place one final stone into the water for all the joys and sorrows yet unspoken in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. May we be truly grateful for all that is our life.
Please remain seated while we sing our meditative hymn, Be Ye Lamps Unto Yourselves. It might be a little bit unfamiliar, so I'm going to sing through it one time, and then we'll sing it twice all together. Be lamps unto yourselves, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only lamp. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only lamp. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only lamp.
Jim and I now take up our roles again, speaking words that point to the unique message and ministry of both Gotama and Jesus.
They are not necessarily in opposition, though they reflect differences in the focus and perspective of each man and the religions that arose from their teachings.
The words of Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
The words of Gotama. Be ye lamps unto yourselves. Rely on yourselves, and so not rely on external help. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp. Seek salvation alone in the truth. Look not for assistance to anyone besides yourselves.
Keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and everyone who knocks, the door will be opened.
There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.
For what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his soul?
Hatred does not cease through hatred at any time. Hatred ceases through love. This is an unalterable law.
It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance.
The root of suffering is attachment.
A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you. May ye also love one another.
Silence the angry man with love. Silence the ill-natured man with kindness. Silence the miser with generosity. Silence the liar with truth.
Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for you.
As a water bead on a lotus leaf, as water on a red lily does not adhere, so the sage does not adhere to the seen, the heard, or the sensed.
Our special music this morning is a meditation of its own, sung by the monks and nuns at Plum Village, the Sangha founded in France by Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, after he was exiled from his homeland in Vietnam for opposing the war there. I invite you now into a time of stillness. And our meditation, and for this meditation this morning, I invite you into that stillness, sitting quietly, noticing your breath, and letting the chanting carry you wherever it will. A musical meditation. So my path to the ministry ran smack through Buddhism. I was not raised particularly religiously. My father did go to church now and then and took us kids along when he did. My mother was raised Catholic, though as a precocious child of 8, she realized that she did not believe in God at all. And she kept this guilty secret for many years. Though by the time I was 7 or 8, she had fully come out as an atheist, I guess figuring that if she could take it at 8, I could too. And this definitely led to some interesting moments for me in my sporadically attended Sunday school classes. Looking back, I now can see that through my life I was on a search for identity, meaning, and purpose, though I never framed it as a spiritual journey. The Christian mythos had not gained any foothold with me at all. Indeed, Jesus, as I grew older, Jesus' sacrificial death never made any sense to me at all, and I pretty much rejected all the rest too. Did have a sense of missing something, though I couldn't name it quite, possibly because I didn't have any spiritual framework. And so my path to Buddhism was circuitous. So I'll tell you just in the thumbnail sketch. When I was in 6th grade, we did a unit on gymnastics in PE. And somebody came up to me and said, "Do you do gymnastics?" And I thought, oh, no, but if you think I do, maybe I should give that a try. So I did. It was great. I competed for the next decade and more. So fast forward that decade, and I'm working out in the gym at college with the gymnastics team. And somebody who was with the Tai Chi club came up to me and said, "Have you ever tried Tai Chi? I think you'd be good at it." And I thought, no, I haven't. So fast forward about another decade, and this time I'm nursing a soccer injury, and I think maybe I should try that Tai Chi thing. So I tried Tai Chi, and the truth is that the guy who thought I would be good at it, he was wrong. It's a totally different way of moving, and it just my gymnast body never learned it fully. But the school that I went to was also very much into teaching Buddhist thought and meditation. And that was a revelation to me. So I meditated and I went on several retreats and different things. And I thought to myself, I'd really like to have a spiritual community. The spiritual thing was growing in me, but I wanted a community. And Buddhists have community. They call it the Sangha, right? But they sit around in silence a lot. And I'm a talker. So I then went in search of a spiritual community. Somebody told me about Unitarian Universalism, and the rest is history. And the thing that I find interesting about it, also ironic, interesting, is that becoming a UU gave me back God and a fully human Jesus who actually I realized had some wisdom to share with me. So, Buddhism is the taproot of my spiritual journey. And there are several metaphors for the religious impulse among humans. Some people say that all religions are different paths up the same mountain. We're all getting to the same place, taking different paths there. And others talk about that religions are all the different religions are light shining through different windows into the same room, illuminating the same truth. Or others will say that all religions are different fingers that are pointing at the same moon. And that one is about, you can mistake the finger that's pointing for the moon itself, for the truth itself, because the truth is a separate thing. And yet, others object to this, saying that religions have unique revelations from a specific source or deity. And maybe they are paths up different mountains, and we can wave at each other from the peaks. Although some may be climbing mountains while others are following rivers deep into the forest or jungle. I do think we have to be careful not to conflate religious messages all willy-nilly. though I will note that the mystical arms, the mystical thread of most faiths do arrive at a similar place of a sense of deep connection with all life, a sense of oneness with humanity and creation, and a oneness with some sort of greater spiritual connection. So I don't have an exact answer. Are religions all pointing to the same truth? Yes, and with a little bit of, with some significant twists that we do need to pay attention to. And there are plenty of folks who have noted the similarities between the teachings of Jesus and the Buddha. How could, and they have wondered how this could be so, given that Siddhartha Gautama, who became known as the Buddha, lived in what is now India and Nepal 500 or 600 years before Jesus of Nazareth walked the lands of the Middle East. The stories about Jesus in the Bible talk about his birth and a little bit about his youth, and then they say nothing until the temptation in the desert when he is called forth into the ministry. And he bursts back on the scene as a wildly spirit-filled radical teacher who freaked out the powers that be at the time. And because of this, and some of the similarities that people have seen between Buddhism and what Jesus had to say, this has led some people to speculate that Jesus actually traveled over to India in those so-called lost years. I have some problems with that particular thought. Among them is that it really arises out of a literal reading of the Bible that assumes that any of the stories of Jesus before his ministry are true. Historically speaking, we really know nothing about Jesus before he burst on the scene as that spirit-filled radical teacher. The rest is made up. Mostly, probably, completely. And yet it is still quite possible that Jesus, the man, came in contact with Eastern thought. Religious scholar Marcus Borg says that it is far more likely that the similarities of their wisdom teaching may flow out of a similarity of their religious experience. The Buddha, after a 6-year religious quest, had an enlightenment experience under the Bodhi tree. Jesus' quest led him to the wilderness and his spiritual mentor, John the Baptist. Both Jesus and Buddha began renewal movements within their respective inherited religious traditions, Hinduism and Judaism. And both were given an exalted, even divine status by the communities which grew up around them. Neither of them really claimed divine status, but boy, people have piled that on ever since. Another scholar of religion and culture, James Hansen, notes that the trade routes called the Silk Road was fully up and running in Jesus' time. So he asks the question, was Jesus a Buddhist? Certainly he was many things: Jew, prophet, healer, moralist, revolutionary, and for most Christians, the Son of God and Redeemer of their sins. But Hansen finds convincing evidence that he was also a Buddhist. And he bases this, at least in part, on the evidence that Jesus was very likely acquainted with Buddhism. And he probably, maybe he didn't go to India, but India came to him. Jerusalem was a hub of trade for centuries since the conquest of Alexander the Great. And so certainly Buddhists had come west to the Middle East in that day. And so very likely Jesus, who was spirit-filled and apparently a very learned Jew from the things that he said, and a curious person who could have wondered about other religious paths. So here is some of what we know about Jesus and Gautama. I have deliberately used the names they carried in their lifetimes because ultimately they were men who lived upon the earth, who both had some kind of overwhelming spiritual insight that they then were able to communicate to others so powerfully that people have been talking about it for millennia up to this moment where here I stand speaking to you about both of them. That's pretty powerful stuff. Now, there are some scholars who really wonder if there really was a real person in either of their cases, rather than just that they have been created as spiritual mythological and spiritual exemplars. Yet, most agree that there was very likely a man named Siddhartha Gautama who lived in India and Nepal around 500 BCE. And that also there was a man named Jesus, Joshua, Yeshua, who lived and then died in the early years of what we call the Common Era. Both did apparently have some sort of enlightenment experience around the age of 30. Jesus had a ministry that lasted 3 to 5 years when he was then executed by the Roman authorities. And Gotama lived for another 50 years, dying at the age of 80, apparently from food poisoning, but there are all kinds of stories around that and why and when and how it happened. Both of them also have stories that have grown up around them, though none can be confirmed to our present standards of historicity. And yet the stories, the big, the mythological, the miracles, the stories about Buddha tend to be about his past lives, and in the past lives in which he was incredibly strong and powerful, or that he gave his life so that others might live, and just remarkable powers. And then we know, most of us in this nation that with such a deep taproot of Christianity, know of the miracle stories of Jesus and the miraculous birth stories. But they were not told by our standards of history. They weren't meant that way. They were told to speak a different kind of truth, a truth of the message, of the power of the message, that the extraordinary insight that these two teachers had. And both of them, also the power of this, the way the Spirit moved in them, and they communicated it out with joy and meaning, to the point that people felt saved or enlightened by hearing them. And for that, in those times, only miraculous stories of their lives would convey their life-changing message, how life-changing their message could be. And yet there are also many differences between them. Jesus was born in the humblest of circumstances to a poor family, and Gotama was born a prince. And again, those are both probably exaggerated for a point. The humility and the servant leadership of Jesus, and what the Buddha gave up to be enlightened. Though Jesus hedged on the subject throughout the Gospels, his followers called him the Messiah and made a god of him. Gotama became known as the Buddha, which simply means awakened one, and he is not revered as a god. Jesus was born into a monotheistic culture, and his teachings were about humans' relationship with God. Gotama was born into a polytheistic culture, and while he was probably not exactly an atheist, He just didn't care very much about God or gods. He was very much a humanist in that he cared about what humans did in our lifetimes and how humans could be liberated from suffering. Many Christians still hold that Jesus was the Son of God and a unique manifestation of spiritual truth, and that others, like Buddhists, are simply wrong. Buddhists believe that Gautama Buddha was one of many fully enlightened beings, and maybe not even the first. Jesus died violently after a relatively brief ministry, and Gotama lived till he was 80 and had years and years and years to teach. Marcus Borg notes, there is a social and political passion in Jesus that we do not find in the Buddha. In the judgment of many Jesus scholars, in addition to being a wisdom teacher and healer, Jesus was a social prophet. He challenged the domination system of his day and its ruling elites, and affirmed an alternative vision. Jesus' activity as a social prophet is the most likely reason his public activity was so brief compared to the Buddha's. If he had simply been a wisdom teacher and healer, I doubt he would have been executed. And so it is also interesting that our passion as Unitarian Universalists, we have a deep taproot source in Christianity. And our passion for justice becomes as deeply as anything else from that Christian tradition, because Jesus was a social prophet. And as much as we resonate, I certainly do, and many of us resonate with the Buddhist message of alleviating suffering, being enlightened, being present in the moment, that can carry us out into the world and seeking justice. Justice is not as strong a force in Buddhism. Although I will also note that Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Buddhist monk in Vietnam, had to leave Vietnam. He practiced what he called an engaged Buddhism, and the powers that be in Vietnam did not like it. And that's why he was exiled to France, and then came to all of us in the world. Ultimately, the greatest commonality between these two teachers, for me, is that they were fully human, exemplars, teachers, not gods. And from there, their paths are more accessible to all. Buddhism tells us that we are all of us, capable of enlightenment. Indeed, Buddhists hold Jesus as another Buddha in a long line of them. And just think, you could be next. Many Christians do believe that Jesus is uniquely the Son of God. Yet the Jesus of the Gospels is delightfully cagey on that topic. And he taught of God's abiding love for all humanity, and that we are all of us, the children of God. Our final hymn today is among my favorites. It sounds along the ages. It speaks to the animating force that brings forth that uplifting sense of connection and the love that propels the impulse to connect with others and the impulse to justice. Is the it of that hymn what explains the deep similarities in the teachings of these two men from such different times, places, and circumstances? Was Jesus also a Buddhist? Were both simply tapping into some universal human truths? I leave you with a final image. American Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield trained as a monk in Thailand, Burma, and India during the years of the war in Vietnam. He recalls visiting a monastery in the Mekong Delta. The monks took us to the end of the island where on top of a hill there was an enormous 50-foot statue of a standing Buddha. And next to Buddha stood an equally tall statue of Jesus. They had their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. And while helicopter gunships flew by overhead and the war raged around us, Buddha and Jesus stood there like brothers, expressing compassion and healing for all who would follow their way. Is it one way? Is it two ways? Do they meet and converge and meet again? In your heart and in the world, I leave that to you. Amen. May it be so. I invite you now into a time of prayer. Holy beingness of many names and no name. Wisdom of the ages manifested as Jesus and Buddha and so many others. Spirit of life that dwells within and among and beyond us this day and always. May we find the sources that speak to us, that bring us wisdom and love and truth and the courage to live by our convictions, by the truth, the love, and the wisdom that we find. And may all those who are ill find healing. May those who are in despair find hope. May those who are without shelter find home. And may all those suffering conflict and war throughout the world, may we find peace. Amen, and blessed be.
Please rise and bow your spirit and join me in our closing hymn, It Sounds Along the Ages. It sounds along the ages, soul answering soul to soul. It kindles on the pages of every Bible scroll. The psalmist heard and sang it, from martyr lips it broke, and prophets' tongues outrang it, till sleeping nations woke. From Sinai's cliffs it echoed, it breathed from Buddha's tree. It chimed in Athens' market, it hallowed Galilee. The hammer stroke of Luther, the pilgrim's seaside prayer, the oracles of concord, one holy word declare. It calls and lo, new justice, it speaks and lo, new truth. In ever noble stature and unexhausted youth, forever on resounding and knowing not of time, our laws might catch the music of its eternal chime.
Please join me in reading the words on the screen as we prepare to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we carry into our lives until we are together again.
So just before the benediction and postload, I invite those who are on Zoom to turn on your screens, look around, see who's there, and jump into a breakout room for your own coffee hour. We will, once again, have coffee hour outside, out back, and in back. And our kids will be running around with us a little bit too. I leave you with these words of the hymn. It sounds along the ages, soul answering to soul. From Sinai's cliffs it echoed, it breathed from Buddha's tree. It charmed in Athens market, it hallowed Galilee. Forever on resounding and knowing not of time, our laws but catch the music of its eternal chime. May that truth, the truth that connects you with your spiritual self, connects you with one another, may that truth chime in your heart. If it have words that call it forth, all the better. And if it is unspoken and an inarticulate yearning and calling you forth, let it ring. Let it ring forth. Let it shine forth from your being. The truth of the Buddha, the love of Jesus, and all of it, may it shine forth from you. Go forth in love. Go forth in peace. May it be so.